needs to be improved, or they will look in terms of how outputs need to happen, right? Now, different people play different roles, right? The HR person, is he able to say the language? What I'm telling is the language of development. I was just looking at, we have one HR head who comes and he says, you know, your performance management system is really not working. So every time he comes, he'll change the performance man. Actually, it's nothing he has done, right? He will then change, you know, your capability development. He will come and then bring another set of instruments which nobody understands in the organization. And line managers really don't have any time. Yeah, this is what. So make things very simple. If you look at the trait of it, there's a trait, you do a workplace, big five, study on HR people, they make simple things complex. The line managers don't have.
See, it's not about lines. The point I'm trying to make is there is one big shift that's happening which most people are missing out. Because we are so used to connecting the dots in a pattern that we are used to, that we keep drawing the same picture again and again. Because we are comfortable with those dots, so we quickly go to those dots and draw the picture we are familiar with. What is really shifting, if you really see in life, what is changing is that organizations are moving away from people-centric business organizations to business-centric people organizations. And that's a difference. You need to understand the difference between them. So we went around creating a myth, not a myth, a reality and situation of the time, that we want to create people-centric business organizations versus the changing business challenges in the environment are telling us to create business-centric people organizations.
So Adil, whether it is business-centric or people-centric, you need to have a combination of both, right? So what I'm telling is that business is definitely at the center. Business cannot exist without people. So what you have got to speak the language is, whatever you are doing, like if I've got a performance management system, if I set goals, how does the goal help in terms of improving sales? How do goals help in terms of improving profits? How do goals help in terms of reducing cost? Or what sort of skills will I look which can help into new product development? Are we speaking that language? It's a question of understanding that business leaders want you to speak that language, and when there are 7 people sitting, you are the only person sitting, because you can't have 100 people sitting over there. In every organization, you have 1 person sitting, and you've got 7 or 8 functional people sitting there. But each of them speak the language of business, right? And you have to convert the people language into a language of business, right? Now you take employee champion, right? Are we playing employee champion? We are just running around with this thing. If I have got, like, I'll tell you in one situation where we had to downsize in a very big way. In 2008, we had to downsize in a very big way. But little did we try to understand that 2 years down the line, when the business starts seeing the light of the day, what will happen to that downsizing? So everybody in the table, no, they said we should downsize. I said, I don't agree with any of you. I don't think we should be downsizing. This is a time to hire talent. They said, no, what will the public say? I said, damn the public thing. No, you're working for the stock markets or you're working for the future. So we hired some of the best talents at the downsizing time. We never retrenched most of our people we never retrenched. People, we identified value creators and people who were fence sitters. Fence sitters, we brought them down to a lower level. And value creators, we pushed them up, right? It took me a lot of time to really convince that set of people. I said, if you have got to downsize these people, then you have got to give them a compensation, because this downsizing is happening because you are not able to predict the future. So why should these people pay for the price of your folly? The cut should happen from, if I remove one vice president level, as Adil said, right, you can hire 100 people. Therefore, these 100 people, life depends on the wrong decisions that you have taken. Nobody realized that when I created those complex financial models, the whole of US went down. Right? Therefore, what are we? Do we really understand that? And are we able to really question? And can we create something? And luckily for me, right, 2008, when we came to 2010, the talent that we had carried really helped us to really compete. So we have got to understand which talent to downsize, which talent. If you start speaking that language, then line managers will think of you very, very differently. For that, you have got to do a lot of hard work, which means there is a business strategy. What is the language of business? So employee champion would mean not following the line managers, but seeing if you have got to take a decision which is not in line with the majority thinking, which may affect employees, affect business, you should have the guts to really stand up. So do we have people, like you see Adil the way he speaks, or you see Sujay, or you see Bector, or you see, now how many of us really, when that single person, it is that single person who sits on the table and creates a perception of the large 80, right? And you need those 80% to really do their work. They may be doing a brilliant work, but the single fellow will really ruin perception of that remaining 80%. And all transactional jobs. Employee champion is primarily about transactions, etc. Right? So majority of the transaction jobs are going out of the organization. So how do you bring efficiency in the process of outsourcing so that you really can play a real employee championing role by predicting what is the future, predicting skills of the future, creating methods and processes to reskill people, and therefore create value for business. If you start speaking this language, your outlook of business to you will be totally different.
I think great point there. I won't be able to, yes, turn
I want to, before you, I just want to stay at that point. Where I was trying to lead the group was that from a springboard of positivity. You can't, although fear also moves mountains and people and functions, I wanted to do it from a springboard of positivity. We've come this far, and I think how do you become strategic? And I think that's the challenge. And just wanted to share a few things which I worked, and I'll repeat those 2-3 things which I think there are some white spaces for us in HR. First is our ability to partner and create strategic plans. And you can't create strategic plans for your organization or partner with it if you don't understand the value drivers, as you alluded to. You don't understand the future of the business. And I think all of that comes, so therefore the ability to look forward into the future.
Vikram, can I
It
ask
is,
only one
so just
question
allow me
the
to
audience?
finish.
One
Allow me to
question.
finish.
How many people know what is 2/3 of $1 billion? Quickly. How many of you can really calculate what is 2/3 of $1 billion? So that's what I'm saying. So now see how many people could raise their hands. So our number orientation, our figure orientation itself is so questionable at times.
I was,
So we need to enhance our.
I was going to come to that. That was the second point on data, and some of the things that have worked, at least for us and for me, is rotating some people into those functions, into those, we've had the 20% people who are there. I've seen other people, who could equally be in the corporate strategy department, who worked, who've been rotated through there. Second, they are equally people who we've rotated through finance and some of the, places where you pick up that literacy on numbers. And so I think some of my fear is people in HR who are the 20% strategic thinkers will be those who come from other functions. Clearly, I think either we go out and get those skills, 2 to 3 skills, and hopefully we will somewhere have the space today to talk about a white space which even the organizations are not talking about, which is innovation. India, how long will we be the back office, whether it is manufacturing, etc. I think many companies today, whether it's pharma, IT, are asking about where is the innovation coming from. Are we all about where will we lead? Where will India lead? What are the 1, 2, 3 spaces? And will we always just bask in the glory of a ISRO making a spacecraft? Is that innovation? What about innovation in the private sector where most of us work? So I think there are some white spaces where HR can contribute.
If you're telling that you have to be data oriented and inciting, this is a trait. This is a trait. If you want to be strategy, if you want to have a strategic orientation, you need to have a mind of that. That means your forward thinking, your idea orientation, your inductive abilities.
Financial acumen.
High, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you have got to get financial acumen, your data crunching, right, and inciting out of data. Even you take marketing professionals, not very many have got these traits, right?
Sure.
So it is not necessary that you have got to have. If you ask me what is 1/3 of this, I won't be able to answer. But what I can tell you is I'll interpret things much better than anybody who can give it, right? So it is not necessary that I have got to have data, but I will get a guy. Because it is not my role to crunch data, but I must be able to appreciate what is coming out of data. But if you tell me that I want to increase profitability of the organization by 30%, I will do that much better than any line manager. Right? Even the manufacturing guy will not be able to tell how will I get a straight line pass through, because I know what is the chain that exists. I know what are the various things that contribute on a straight line. The things can really break the whole process, which he will not be able to do, right? So therefore, we should be able to contribute to the gap which others have. If you have seen Belbin, you cannot get everybody with everything. You have got to have the highest thing which a HR person needs to have is compassion, right? He should have the ability to challenge, right? He should have the ability to see patterns. So I don't have to create a pattern, because then I would have gone into a different role. I should have the ability to see patterns. I should have the emotional, if you look at the emotional tolerance, if you look at number of people who change the jobs, the highest is the HR fraternity. Right? So by the time you are, because I've changed jobs in 2 years, I've changed jobs in 6 years, I'm here for 13 years, right, in Mahindra Group. I've seen where I've changed jobs in 2 years, I have not created any value for myself or for the organization. Where I've changed jobs in 6 years, is some benefit for me, but a larger benefit for the organization. Because it takes 2 years for you to pick up and then you start contributing. But where I've spent 13 years, right, I have found that there's a total transformation in my mind, and there is a total transformation even for the business, right? So we have the lowest, what you call is frustration tolerance capability. We speak of retention, and we are the first ones to jump at a 40% increase in salary, right? I've seen people I'm taking from my own example. There was a time when the salary was where I changed my first job for a car. And I realized that was a big mistake I made. I should not have looked at the car. I should have looked at what learning I would have got, right? But people don't think this way.
Right. So I mean, I think what I hear Prince say is take pride
You
in
have
your
to be a role
function.
model.
You
What I
you
was
know
telling is
bring
that-
your function, bring passion into what it is that you're
What you
doing.
do.
So what if you're the employee champion? In fact, even that role we're not playing as greatly as we really can. Bring in strategic contributions by virtue of being able to be proud of what contributions you can make in your role. So you have a point. Wait 1 second. I think she's been waiting to speak. So yeah, come on. Let's
So
hear you
I-
quickly.
okay,
Yeah.
hi.
We'll just take two more views from the floor and I'll move on. Yeah.
Sure.
So-
I just wanted to go a step back in terms of the framework and the role of employee champion versus
Yeah.
the business partnering role. Now, what happens is conveniently the benchmarks for HR keeps raising. Okay, so, and every time you deliver a superior performance, everything and anything becomes an HR issue. And I have seen it very conveniently when I was just about thinking of maybe participating in the new manager development program, where it's all about business partnering and increasing their capability. You know, once HR plays this HR champion, be it a CAP program, be it a innovation program, be it an ops benchmarking program, everything is conveniently shifted to HR in spite of being a lean team. Okay, and I represent a product company with 3 centers in India with a very lean team, right? So, you know, somewhere I think we should also look at HR per se. I wouldn't agree with low self-esteem because I wouldn't have seen that. And going back to my friend's issue here, I think my marketing friends who graduated with me now ask me, why haven't I taken HR? So that's completely my stand. So what about managers taking responsibility in, you know, building the organization? I think we should also look at that question. Just a thought.
Okay. You're saying you see a lot migrating to HR.
Yes, so-
and if they were seen as incompetent, it wouldn't migrate to HR. Is that
Right.
the point you're
So
making?
even a performance management program, right, improvement plan, they would say, okay, why don't you do it? You know, why don't you take the initiative? Why don't the managers take the initiative of facing the employees? Because
All right.
that's what it's all about.
All right. So it's a good point there. I'm going to ask yes, you had a point to make, and then I'm going to ask, we have the head of HR of ING Vysya Bank right up at the back there, and I'm happy to see you here, so I'm going to ask you to share your views here.
Hi, I'm Sujoy from the mobile store. I had training with them. I kind of agree with what Prince says because today when we look at a CEO, he's not a specialist, he's a generalist. And he has specialists under him to take forward the agenda of the organization. And these are the training heads, the supply chain head, the HR head, the finance head. Can we expect each of these specialists to become a generalist and understand the different functions of the organization? We can't. Then they will be a CEO in themselves. They have to carry a specific task which is given to them, of course, within the framework of the business understanding. So if we expect them to be a generalist in everything, I don't think they will be good in the function which they are expected to do. That's what I think it should be.
Okay, all right. You know, we can debate that and offline because essentially, you know, I'd like to retort back to what it is that you're saying, but we're running short of time. I'll take your point.
Hi, thanks, Sujaya. Just one point over here that I guess because of this 80% that we basically look more, HR is considered more as a cakewalk by the other functions, you know, meaning they would think that anybody can do HR. So a sales guy becomes a CEO, he thinks, you know, HR is something that anybody can do. And what do they understand is that typically if you can manage your team or manage your people, meaning you can do HR. Because what otherwise HR would typically do is they would do transaction management, policy administration, routine management, entry to exit processes and annual reviews and comms and stuff like that. So, that makes me also think that, why are more women in HR? Okay. And this goes back to a question, it's not a prejudice, but suppose somebody asks a woman that, no, suppose somebody is asking a man that, what does your wife do? Does she work? And the man would say, no, she is a housewife. So woman might do everything, right from early morning to late night, everything for the family, for the children, for the husband, shopping, everything. But eventually what the husband would say is that, no, she doesn't work, she's a housewife. So typically what I've also experienced is that an HR would do everything within the organization, right from a pre-hiring to a post-exit, all processes, all transactions, all contribution to transformational work. But still the business would say, no, she doesn't really work because she's a housewife. Meaning that's the analogy that I can see. And
I'm not sure the men in the audience are terribly excited about being equated, their profession being equated to a housewife.
no, what I meant to say is,
but
this
we
is
get
how,
the
this is how you
drift on
get
what you're saying.
treated at times.
They're taken for granted, is what you're
Yeah, and one last thing is,
No wife will allow you to be taken for granted.
well, I think two things. One is, what are the desired competencies or attributes that we really want to see in HR professionals going forward? Just the way as one of the speakers said, we are already at the threshold. All right.
Right.
So, what attributes, competencies would really make the HR function look even better
Sure.
going forward? And second is, all that we do in HR, can we have some measurability towards it? Like we do so much of talent pipeline, but can we show how it contributes to the revenue creation?
Sure.
We do so much on talent building. Can we show how it's impacting the business or the performance? I guess so. Measurability is one aspect that needs to come out more. And second is what I said is getting the new set of competencies, attributes that can really define the new age HR.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
hopefully we'll come to some of that. I think audience, give yourselves a round of applause. I think you did a great job by taking the discussion forward. So thank you for that. I think with that, I'm going to move to the next part of our conversation. This is essentially, I'm going to be talking here about, some of the great studies and platforms for recognition for human resources and human resources professional. Here I'm referring to, the very prestigious and respected Great Place to Work study. And here, as you can see, we've got winners this is their last study, which was done in 2013, I think. Here you've got the list of winners for the 2013 study. You'll see that out of a list of 10, you've got a significant 5 winners from the IT/ITES space, right? This is the Aon Hewitt Best Employers study of 2013. And here again, you'll see in a list of 10, you've got almost 3 from the ITES space. You've got a little more variety here, but by and large, this is essentially ITES space. If you look at what kind of best practices these organizations have actually been rewarded and recognized for, obviously Google, which is essentially top of the pops, the favorite for all of Gen Y and the rest of that. Their 20% time, okay, is one of their best practices, which means one KRA for everyone is something that they can decide on. They have the freedom to be able to do whatever they want. So 20% of their time is their own. So the freedom to do what you'd like to do, experiment, innovate, do whatever else, and that's held them in good stead in the kind of area of work that they are. Their practices, they encourage innovation, adaptation, and risk-taking. The organization knows that people value meaning in their work. They want to be involved with things that are important. The practice helps value meritocracy over tenure and title. But essentially speaking, it means 1 day per week or 20% of the time, employees are allowed to do whatever it is that they might really like to do. I'm going to share some more. Cadbury's got something called Cadbury's Food Festivals. And these are held at their factories to be able to enable employees to be able to, and their families to be able to participate and experience cuisines and all kinds of foods and stuff like that. I'm going to move on. Intel has got a best practice Dear Boss initiative. I mean, the bosses, at least in my organization, would be thrilled if they had something like that. And Intel, an award is bestowed upon the boss by the subordinate as part of the Dear Boss initiative. It is one of the Intel's most popular engagement practices, helps reportees recognize, appreciate, and acknowledge the efforts of senior colleagues within the organization. I've just given you a smattering of some of the studies, the fact that by and large, the particular kind of companies that seem to be featured on that list and the kind of practices that have gotten rewarded over a period of time. I'm going to ask you, which kind of takes us to the whole area of best practices in these studies and the whole lure of getting featured on these recognition platforms. And my question here is that given the various recognition platforms that employee studies like Best Employer, Great Place to Work, and the others are offering, is there a temptation to copy the winners blindly? Does HR as a community weigh peer recognition over actual deliveries on strategic initiatives of value within the organization? Is there a confusion between the two? Prince, do you want to go first on this one? As a community, are we obsessed with recognition? Maybe we're not getting enough inside the organization. So all of this is so important, and then let's try and...
That's something which bothers me. I've not seen marketing professionals sitting and creating a kudo for themselves, right? Or I have not seen finance, but there is outside world, which outside their domain, which really speaks of. So it could probably be right, because you are, once somebody says that you are treated like a wife who is not appreciated, somebody says that you have a low esteem, somebody says that you have, you do not